There's a lot of talk about freedom around this time of year, around the 4th of July. I mean, it is called Independence Day after all, so it certainly makes sense. And there are a lot of freedoms that we in this country enjoy that people around the world in other places don't. In fact, it's like they only dream of. But what does it mean to be truly free? Well, here's one dictionary definition that I found. Let me read it to you. Freedom is the power to determine our own actions without restraint. And that without restraint part seems to really be pretty prevalent thought pattern in people today, at least I think. It's my right. I can, so I will. I'm going to do what I'm going to do because I want to do it. That's freedom. Right? And on and on and on it goes. I read an interesting article a week or so ago in my news feed from BuzzFeed. Here's the title. I wrote it down. 31 things people were taught to believe or value by their parents that they can't get behind as adults. Which, I'm not going to bore you with the whole article here, but it basically boiled down to the same sort of thinking, the same sort of individualistic thinking that I'm free to do what I want and think what I want and act like I want because this is my life and this is my world and this is my time and I'm going to live my truth. And you know what? I'm free to do that. The power to determine our own actions without restraint. Very me-centered and very much rights without responsibilities. But let me ask you this. Is rights without responsibilities really freedom? Or can those freedoms actually end up being another sort of slavery? Something that you're sort of stuck in, something that you're chained to, something that you want to get out of, but you just can't. Seems to me that there are a whole lot of lifestyle choices and thought patterns that would kind of fall into that category. But if you're out there listening to me and you're one of those cheering me on as my kind of a drive-by analysis of societal trends because you're thinking and looking out there and thinking the same way, well, let me ask you this. Could that same sort of self-delusion also exist in the church? I mean, check out this exchange between Jesus and the people of his day. I'm reading from John chapter 8, beginning at verse 31. Jesus said to the people who believed in him, "You are truly my disciples if you remain faithful to my teachings. And you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." "But we are descendants of Abraham," they said. "We have never been slaves to anyone." "What do you mean, you will be set free?" Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth. Everyone who sins is a slave of sin. A slave is not a permanent member of the family, but a son is part of the family forever. So if the Son sets you free, you are free. You are truly free." Now, Jesus is having a discussion here about faith and life with people, here's the quote, who had believed in him. Now, that who had believed in him means in today's context, we'd call them, again, church people. And when Jesus is telling these church people, following my teaching is truth, and that's the truth that'll set you free, then he gets a little pushback from that. Free? Free? We've never been slaves to anyone. I guess they forgot about those 400 years in Egypt, or those 70 years in Babylon, or the current occupation by the Romans. But Jesus doesn't even correct them on that there. Because you see, Jesus is talking about something more than a national status or political freedom. Jesus here is talking about our spiritual condition. All right, and because he's talking about our spiritual condition, Jesus reminds them, everyone who sins is a slave of sin. And what he's meaning by saying that is that our sinful nature and the sins that we keep on committing because of that selfish, self-centered, self-serving nature inside of us, it's not true freedom at all, even if it looks like it. I mean, can you think of some examples of things where people, they thought that would be fun or that would be freedom, and it ended up actually trapping them in something, some hurt, some habits, some hang-ups, some baggage that they'd like to be free from, but now they're stuck? I mean, was that fun or freeing thing actually freedom then? Or did it end up being just another form of slavery? And again, I suppose it's pretty easy to point a finger here at other people on that one. I mean, to look at their rights without responsibilities behavior and say to yourself, well, you should have known better, right? Especially if you're one of those that understands that with rights also come responsibilities to others in the community. That responsibility goes along with rights, and your behavior reflects that. So even if you're not perfect, you're seen as pretty good and responsible to most people. And you know what? That's where the people that Jesus was talking to here and that were giving him some pushback, that's how they saw themselves too. We're Abraham's children, they said. And if you'd modernize that, you'd be saying, hey, we're church members. We got our names on the rolls. We show up, at least on the big days. That ought to mean that we're good with God. We keep the rules, they felt. Again, we're good people. We're good people, so that should mean we're good with God as well. What they didn't realize was that was a form of works righteousness, and that works righteousness is actually another form of spiritual slavery. See, it's not just the slave to sin and to your sins, but the slave to your ideas of reaching God. And that works righteousness is kind of a treadmill that you can be stuck on too and never really get off of. Treadmill number one, well, that's, I'm good, but have I done enough? Really? How can I be sure? How can I really know that I've done enough? So I better just keep doing good, do more good, do one more thing just in case, and you're stuck there. You're stuck there feeling you've always got to do more, always got to do more, always got to do more to do good to make sure God will look on you favorably. Treadmill number two with that way of thinking, well, that's, if bad things are happening in my life, or if good things aren't happening with some degree of frequency, well, I guess I must be doing something wrong, or saying something wrong, or not asking something right. And again, you're just kind of stuck there. You're stuck feeling good neither about yourself nor about God. And it's actually the same me-centered sort of stuff, now with religious overtones, but it's not any more freeing than that live your own truth sort of philosophy was. But you know what? Jesus does offer an alternative. So here's Jesus' alternative definition of freedom. John chapter 8, verse 36. So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free. So what did Jesus mean by that? Well, if you trace the word freedom through the Bible, in the Bible, freedom is not something you carve out for yourself. Right? Freedom is always a gracious gift of God. Freedom is also not something that's defined so much in terms of an individual's actions. It's more described as something that exists in the context of the community. And in the New Testament, get this, freedom is never defined as political freedom. I mean, Jesus espoused no political or economic system. In fact, you remember what he said when he was before Pilate? My kingdom is not of this world. See, the New Testament defines freedom in spiritual terms. Freedom from sin, from death, and from the power of the devil. And people can't free themselves from that kind of slavery. Never could, never will. Right? That freedom comes only by the grace of God through Jesus Christ. See, believers still sin. I sin every day. I don't want to, but I do. I still think wrong stuff. I still say wrong stuff. I still do wrong stuff. I still sometimes have cruddy attitudes. There's sometimes when I still define truth for myself instead of living God's truth. But, I'm no longer stuck there. And that I don't have to stay there. And that's what Jesus is defining here as freedom. When I'm in those places and I recognize that I'm in those places and where it's leading, I can ask Jesus for forgiveness. I can ask Jesus for forgiveness, and I know that he will forgive me. That's what he died to do. And then I have a fresh start, and that's freedom. That fresh start in Jesus is freedom. In Jesus, I can be better, right? And that's freedom too. I don't have to let sin control me, right? I don't have to let those hurts and habits and hang-ups have the run of my life. Here's the way Paul put it in one of his letters, Romans chapter 6. We know that our old sinful selves were crucified with Christ, so that sin might lose its power in our lives. We are no longer slaves to sin. Now again, that's not saying that Christians don't sin. It's saying that we're no longer slaves to sin. It's saying I have the freedom to be better. And that in Jesus, I can be better. And then I also start to realize that true freedom also comes with great responsibility. Let that sink in for a minute. True freedom also comes with great responsibility. See, freedom doesn't mean that you have the power or the freedom to do your own thing or live your own life any way you want to. See, true freedom is found in life with God and in life lived for God and in life lived responsibly in community. In other words, in Jesus, you're not only freed from something, you're freed to something. Here's some Bible on that. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 15. Christ died for everyone. He died so that those who live should not live for themselves anymore. They should live for Christ. And Galatians chapter 5, verses 1 and 13. So Christ has truly set us free. Now make sure that you stay free and don't get tied up again in slavery to the law. For you have been called to live in freedom, my brothers and sisters, but don't use your freedom to satisfy your sinful nature. Instead, use your freedom to serve one another in love. Now that's a different definition of freedom, isn't it? But I happen to think that Jesus was actually right. So if the Son sets you free, you are truly free. You're freed from those nagging, deep down worries. Am I good enough? Have I done enough? You're freed from that because you believe the truth that Jesus did it all for you. You're freed from guilt over your mistakes because you believe the truth that Jesus died to forgive all your sins and give you a fresh start. You're freed from the consequences and the messes of those purely self-centered, pleasure-seeking, chasing after happiness choices Because you believe the truth that you don't just live for self anymore. You're living for God. And because you're living for God, you're making different choices. I like the way the psalmist put that. Psalm 119, verse 44 and 45. Let me read it to you. I will keep on obeying your instructions forever and ever. I will walk in freedom. Why? Before I have devoted myself to your commandments. And not only are you freed from stuff, you're also freed to things. You're actually freed to move past all those hurts and habits and hang-ups because you believe the truth that those things too were carried to the cross with Christ. And not only that, you're also free to find joy in the responsibilities that you have in community. To actually find joy in those responsibilities because you believe the truth that you no longer live just for yourself anymore. And that as you live for God, you start taking seriously your responsibility that those Bible verses were talking about. To serve one another in love. To use your freedom to serve one another in love. And you actually start finding joy in that. And as you do, when that starts to happen, you're not living your own truth anymore. You're living God's truth. And as you're living God's truth, I found that that's what makes you truly free.